This is Good Books, Big Questions, bold, loving, and sensible conversations about faith. I'm Karen Stiller. Dieula Previlon is my guest. She's the author of Does God See Me? How God Meets Us in the Center of Our Trauma Healing Journey. Here's our conversation, unabridged. Welcome, Dieula.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Dieula, tell us how this book came about.
Oh, the big question. So the book came about with me being at the center of my own painful and traumatic event. I've been planning on writing this book for years. I was a minister at a church as missions pastor. And so I'd been doing lots of work in the area of trauma healing. I was a counseling student in seminary. And the first time I can think of putting the book together, I started processing the book is when I was doing prison ministry. So I started working with a group of women in Dallas prison and Dallas jail. So there's a difference between jail and prison. So Dallas jail, we were working with the women for about 3 years. And every week, once a week, we would go and meet with about 30, 40 women. And I would write curriculum, I would write questions. And one of the first curriculum I wrote was her story, my story, our story. So just talking about women and stories of women from the Bible, my story and their stories, and how God meets us in the middle of those stories. So I started putting curriculum together and putting pieces together. And I would always tell myself one day I will write this book. One day I will do this. Well, in 2019, one day came right in front of me. So I reached out to a friend of mine and said, hey, I've been putting all these pieces together. Can you help me edit? She had been an author and she had been an editor in different places. I said, here are the bones of this book. Can these bones live, so to speak? And she just affirmed me and said, oh, I think you have something there, but it needs some work. And so that was probably September of 2019. Well, December of 2019 came and my nephew passed and my brother passed tragically, both of them very tragic. And at that point, I did not think I could write another word. I didn't think this project was going to come to fruition. I did not think I would have anything to say to help people talk about trauma and help people process trauma. And God would not let me take that posture of not having anything to say. I think God kept saying, I believe now you have something to say. Because before, I was going to write the book as a teacher, teaching people and sharing people, from a higher position, from a place of, I know about trauma, but from a teacher standpoint. But now God was saying, now you have more to say, not just as a teacher, but as a participant in the trauma healing journey. So that's how it came about. The book that we now have is not the book I had intended on writing previously.
I think that is so beautifully common, it would be my guess. But Does God See Me does have a lot of personal stories of loss, of recovery, of church hurt and harm, of racial trauma, but also, of course, a path of healing. How do we reach a place of being so open and generous with our own stuff, almost served and shared in order to help other people?
Yeah, I think it comes from a place of honesty. When we can be honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing and, how we're experiencing it. I find that because many of us grow up in the Christian faith, we learn not to be honest about what's happening with us. We cover them up with like Christianese language. We cover them up with what we should say, how we should feel, all the shoulds, rather than what's really in front of you. And so I find that when we can get over that Christianese posture of the shoulds, then we move into a place of real raw honesty. And then we get to that place of moving forward into our healing journey. That is a process in and of itself, especially if you've been in fundamental spaces that don't allow you to fully be human in your experiences, in your feelings, in in what's happened to you,
Yeah.
and then cover them up with Christian shoulds.
You name
When we can get over the shoulds, we can move into a greater healing place.
Yeah, you almost move from should to we could. We could be honest. We could be connecting with each other. You name a crucial tension in the book,
Absolutely.
which you've hinted at. You name two questions. Where was God when our trauma occurred? And why didn't God prevent it? And both those questions are so honest. And you write, one thing that angers me most is the simplistic answers people give in an attempt to resolve theological tensions that are too complex for our limited understanding. What's a better way to respond to those questions, Dieula?
I don't know.
That's refreshing.
I think I don't know. Yes, I don't know is an answer that allows the traumatized, the grieving person to have their process with God. Because no answer will be enough to quell the pain, to silence the pain. Nothing will be enough. Nothing will be enough because the trauma has already happened. The pain has already happened. There's a process there in the grieving journey, the painful journey that everyone must have. And answers cheapen that process. It takes away from that process. And the answers are never enough. And so I believe a good answer is, I really don't know what God is doing in your story. What I do know is that God is good. So I will sit with you in the unknown of your unique story with God.
Yeah, that is so important. And what I really like about what I think you're saying there, Dieula, is that it's still okay to ask the questions. Like people don't need to have the answers, but we get to ask those questions, which makes me think about lament, which you explore in the book in a beautiful way. Can you define, if I could say, healthy lament? Maybe lament is always healthy, but what does a healthy lament look like?
Yeah, healthy lament is, well, the thing is, lament can seem unhealthy to a lot of people. Lament can, when in its raw state, it can seem heretical. It can seem that you're just doing too much. You're too angry. You're too sad. You're questioning scripture too much. You're sitting in pain for too long. And so depending on the context and depending on the audience, healthy lament may seem unhealthy. It may seem unhelpful. I just came back from Africa, and one of the questions or the answers for or the way she defined lament was that lament is the human way of talking to God when things are not right. It's a normal way of talking to God when things are not right, when things don't make sense. And so whichever way you talk to God is the lament, which, and the important thing is that you're talking to God, you know, you're having this discourse with God. You're having this conversation with God. So it is important that God is a part of this process. And I believe when we're talking to God, it's all okay. It's all helpful. It's all acceptable. It's all allowed, because when we look into the Psalms, there are some things that were shared. Sometimes I have to clutch my pearls and say, "Can you say that to God?" You know, I'm afraid for you, because you just went to a point of no return, maybe, but yet they're still alive. They were still alive, and they were still allowed, to have these conversations with God. So for me, I'm like, I believe it's all permissible. I believe it's allowed, as long as you integrate God into the process of the pain, because you're talking to your maker. You're asking some questions to your maker. You're asking important things to your maker, and your maker can handle it. We can't, right? We have issues with it. We can't handle it. We can't take it, but God can.
You
And it's
mentioned,
all allowed. So depending on the context, yeah.
well, first of all, I cannot picture you clutching pearls, but I'm glad you confessed that, because that is helpful. You mentioned the Psalms, and
Yes.
I think of all the like other stories in the Bible that are not neat and tidy, and you work beautifully well with the story of Sarai and Hagar, which is such a
Yeah,
difficult story, and really gets to the heart of,
it
does
is.
God see me? Why is this question one that we can't afford to dance around? Why is it such an important question?
It's a question that all of us must and will ask, of God. Uh, Partly because we can see God. We can see God activated in nature. We can see the sun, moon, stars. We can see trees. We can see the oceans. We can see the miracles of God, new mercies every day. We can see that God is here. We can see that God is real. I cannot say that God isn't real. I have a brand new granddaughter, and I can see the miracle of life through this baby. But there are some other things I can also see, and I must ask God some questions. That I see pain, I see suffering, I see it all over the globe, and I have some questions. I don't understand how such a beautiful God, who created the earth, moon, and stars, and created my beautiful granddaughter, who are doing things I never remember my kids did, but my granddaughter, she's doing them. So I can see the miracle of life every single day, but yet I can also see the pain and suffering, and the two feel very inconsistent to the nature of God. The pain and the beauty, like the two of them don't feel like they connect. And at some point we will be faced with the two, and we must ask the question of God: do you see me too? If you see these things, if these things are going on, if this beauty is happening, but yet there's this pain, and do you see us in this pain? And I believe that's the question that Hagar was asking, or something similar, right? Something similar, because I can see you, God. I've heard of you, God. I've heard of the miracles you do. I can see you in nature. I believe you're real. But what about me? Do you see me in this pain? Do you see me in this situation? Will you redeem this? How does this work? Is this redeemable? You know? So it's important for us to ask that question, and I believe the question is important because it's part of the healing journey. It's part of us getting to the other side to reaffirm that God is real. Maybe I don't fully understand what's happening here in the in the area of pain and suffering, but I do believe that God is real, and I do believe that God sees me because of this, and that. We each need to have this conversation so that with God, so that we can get to the other side and say, yes, I don't understand this thing here, but I do affirm that God is real and God sees me.
Dieula, what have you learned about resilience from the women that you work with overseas? And also, that being seen by God, what does that mean to women who are going on a healing journey through trauma to know that they can ask that question? And I mean, the answer is yes, right?
Yes, yes. It's freedom. It is really freedom to know that they can have a process with God, a real process with God to ask that question. And what I see is that when they are given permission, when they see scripture, when I point them to scripture of this cloud of witnesses who have asked those similar questions and live, right? And live and have a thriving relationship with God, you can almost see them walking differently, them breathing differently, them engaging life differently. We were just in Kenya last week, and I saw this process in front of me on day one. Yeah, we just lay the foundation on day one and say, this conference is about God seeing us and God helping us through the trauma healing journey. But there's some posturing we need to do differently. Number one is that questions are allowed. And you could almost see their eyes light up when I say it is important for us to ask these questions. And I think when we share that with them, that questions are allowed, it helps them to continue to keep taking one step after another in their healing journey. It helps them in the area of building hope and building their faith. One woman also said about lament that it is faith refusing to be silent.
Beautiful.
Lament is faith refusing to be silent. So when they get permission to ask the questions, to not be silent, to be vocal about the question, it causes them to move differently in their healing journey. It causes them to be even more resilient in their healing journey. It causes them to not give up.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to see women who are healing, women who have been through traumas upon traumas, to say, I will not give up. I will continue to ask my questions. I will continue to hold on to God while I ask my question, knowing that God sees me.
And how important are these women to each other on the healing journey? I'm imagining a great solidarity of support, and that listening and going on a healing journey together with someone else can be so powerful, even though all our stories are different.
Yes, yes. I smile at you asking that question because the first day of every conference we do, and even in this one in Kenya, I told them that the number one rule about the healing journey is that no one heals alone. No one heals alone. And that we all need each other in the healing journey. And on our last day, when we're debriefing and talking about what they've learned, one woman stood up and she said, "Thank you. You reminded me that no one heals alone and that I need sisters and we need one another to heal together." It's foundational. Healing cannot happen in solitude. Healing cannot happen while we're isolated, while we're doing our own individual work. Lament does not work alone. In the book Prophetic Lament with Dr. Soong Chan Ra, he talks about lamenting as a community together. Imagine you're going through something, and as a community, you all come together to affirm one another, not only in your pain, but in the fact that God is real and that we can lament to God, and we do it as a community together. That's part of the healing journey. That's a major part of the healing journey, coming together as sisters and brothers, even, for us to heal together. Healing cannot happen alone. It needs to happen as a community together. So I love that aspect of the healing journey, that God did not allow us, and God has not given us this stamp of approval to just heal alone, that he created us to need each other, to want each other, and that seeing one another, looking at each other, being beside one another, walking with one another is a part of the healing journey. It's actually the part that holds it all together. That's the glue to the healing journey, is the need for one another.
And yet, Dieula, I see, in my own circles, so many hurting, grieving people who feel so intensely lonely. And I wonder how we ask for help, how we make ourselves be more vulnerable to say, I need you. I need someone to help me, because I think we're afraid to do that sometimes. I don't know if it's we're afraid to be weak, or we're mad at everybody, or what it is, but help us with that.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes time to build relationships. I think we all, many of us feel like it should be natural, but forging new relationships, or even relationships around you, and nurturing them, that takes a lot of bravery. It takes time, because the reality is that there's a level of authenticity, there's a level of exposing yourself that it requires, and that needs safety, right? For someone to be able to expose themselves and be authentic, you need to know that you're safe. If you're not safe, and if the community around you is not safe, it's not going to happen. So when I talk about needing community, it's needing healthy communities that are safe. And we are all a part of nurturing those healthy communities. Now, part of building healthy communities is learning to have hard conversations, learning to have difficult conversations, and to do conflict with one another, and to let other people know, these are my needs. When I share something with you, I would like it to be confidential. And when I share something with you, I would love for you to respond this way and that way. This works for me, and that does not work for me. Those are conflictual conversations, and we're scared to death to do conflict with one another. So a lot of times we think it's easier to not do the conflict and not tell people that we need this and that, we have this unique need and that unique need, because we don't want people to think that we're needy, and that, we are just overdoing it, and we're just too demanding, and, our life is too hard. Our lives are not too hard. Our traumas are not too difficult. We are not hard people. We respond to love. We respond to compassion. We respond to grace. We are naturally, created that way, to respond to compassion, love, and grace, right? But the problem is that we're scared to death that when we tell people that we have this need, when we talk to them that we would love to have this conversation, this hard conversation, we're afraid of rejection. Mm-hmm. We're afraid that we will not be met with grace, love, and compassion. So we hide away. So to do it is really to ground ourselves in bravery, to ground ourselves in knowing that God did not give us another option. We need one another. The need for each other in the healing journey is not a choice, it's a must. And so we ground ourselves in knowing that our healing is dependent on our sisters and brothers. And so we do the hard work. Even for me as a therapist, it's hard for me to sometimes have those difficult conversations with friends and say, hey, I know we're in different seasons. At the same time, I need you. So when I call you, please call me back. When I text you, please text me back. If there's a situation, just let me know you can't talk right now. So it's teaching one another how to show up for each other. And it requires difficult conversations.
And this is taking me right back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about honesty, because I'm pretty honest, and I know I've freaked people out before with my honesty. And even you saying things like perfectly reasonable phrases like, when I text you, please text me back. When I call you, please call me back. I think even just simple things like that would cause great stress in some people to hear that kind of honesty.
Yes.
So how do we get better at receiving directness that is grounded in love, that is grounded in genuine need? Because there's nothing wrong with saying that.
No, it's nothing wrong with saying it. But I think we need to do the work continually with one another and say, hey, friend, we're in a committed relationship together. And to be in a committed relationship with one another, sometimes we'll have difficult conversations. Are you okay with that?
Okay.
Are you okay with sometimes with me having a need that you might not see? Is it okay for me to tell you? It's almost like doing it's like vows.
Yeah, I can see
Vows
that.
in friendships. Yeah. It's vows in friendships. And we need that because we both need to be on the same page, right? We both need to have the same types of expectations. That this is a different kind of relationship I'm trying, and the type of relationship I'm trying has to be based on mutuality. And part of the mutual work that we're doing is that we have the same language. That when I'm in need, is it okay for me to call you? When there's a need, is that okay? When I don't meet the need, I would like for you to tell me about it. And when you don't meet the need, is it okay for me to tell you about it? That's mature relationships. But oftentimes we take it for granted. We think everyone should know, but everyone does not know. We don't know these things. I'm still teaching. I'm still talking to my husband about some of these things, right? And we've been married 27 years.
Well, that's reassuring.
And so, yes. And so it's important for us to continue to have these conversations and do them and have them over and over again, so that we can both be on the same page, so that we can love well, so we can show up well for each other, because there's no healing without a beloved community.
Dieula, tell us about the concept of the Sankofa trip. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
It just sounds so beautiful. You describe a beach you sat on where your ancestors would have boarded slave ships. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So Sankofa is a word from a tribe in Ghana that means to go back and retrieve what is at risk of being lost. And so a lot of times when there's Sankofa trips, we do them in our denomination. This one particular trip I talk about in the book, I did with a group that was going back to ancestral places like Nigeria and Benin. This one was a combined trip to Nigeria and Benin. And all of my life, I had heard that our ancestors came from, West Africa, particularly Benin. And so I did, an ancestry DNA, and, we received the results and all of that. And I wanted to go. I wanted to go. So Sankofa is really to go back and reconnect with the past, connecting with the past, not in a way of staying in the past, not in a way of being so depressed in the past that you can't move forward. If anything, the past propels you into your future. You get information about the past so that it can propel you into a greater living in the future. And so I sat on the beach of Nigeria, where there's a path that the slaves, the enslaved walk, and we walked the path, and we sat on the shore where they would have gotten on the ships, or they would have been forced on the ships. And we sat there. We just looked into the ocean, and we just took in that moment. There was very little talking. There was very little laughter, but just being still in the moment and just paying attention to our bodies, paying attention to the shore, paying attention to the new generation, because there were young kids who were on the beach. They were there with their friends. So paying attention to all that was happening in that moment. And for me, it was a moment of going forward. It was a moment of almost receiving my assignment once again, to go for. And it was so beautiful. It was so pure. It was so needed for me to go back, because part of the work I'm doing now is because I went back. And I went back to several places. I went back to Haiti. I had not been back to Haiti um, for 20 plus years. And so when I went back to Haiti, I retrieved something to move me forward. When I went back to Nigeria and Benin, I retrieved something to help me move forward. I went back with my denomination to Salem, to Tennessee, to all of these places of the civil rights movement, and I retrieved something to help me move forward. So going back is not about staying back, but it's going back and receiving instruction. It's receiving confidence. It's receiving the joy of the ancestors and taking all that goodness with us so that we can continue to move forward in the future. So, yeah.
Dieula, we talked about lament and now going back to move forward. Can you share with us how you understand joy?
Oh, my goodness. Joy is one of the pieces in the healing journey that I believe does not get enough credit to help us move forward. Joy must be sprinkled all throughout the journey. A lot of people think that the healing journey is compartmentalized, right? We do we do all of the once we are healed, then we can experience joy. So we do all of the pain and suffering on this front side. We do all the grieving over here. And once we're done with the grieving, once we're done with the trauma healing, now we can experience joy. I said, no. So I'm always telling people that is not how it works. Joy must be sprinkled all throughout the healing journey, because what joy does is that it pushes us into hope. And what hope does is that it holds us so that we don't fully lose it all. We have to have a certain measure of hope so that we can keep moving forward. So joy, hope, all of those things must be sprinkled all throughout the healing journey. And some people might even think that when I'm grieving, when I'm traumatized, I can never experience joy. And I said, then you don't know how joy works, because joy is not happy. Joy is about witnessing that there are still things that God is doing in the present. So sometimes I'll witness the baby, and that brings me joy. I'll witness the leaves shaking back and forth, moving back and forth. And there's something about realizing that there is a God that's doing that. It forces me into a moment of joy. When I'm walking and I see people crossing past me, it forces me to have a little bit of moment. I'm like, wow, God is amazing that we each have these stories and we're passing each other, and we don't even know each other's stories, but there's an energy that transfers between me and that person that just said good morning. I just said good morning to. So joy is that piece of the journey that must be sprinkled all throughout the healing journey. I remember when my brother passed, and it was just days after my brother passed, and my nephews and nieces wanted to sing a song for his funeral. And so they're practicing this song, the hymn, and they're practicing the harmony. It was a Kirk Franklin song. So they're practicing the harmony, and every time they would mess up on the harmony, they would scream so loud and shout so loud and making fun of each other in the loudest way, in the loudest chant, almost as if we did not have someone that just passed a couple days ago. That's joy. That is joy in the moment. Just witnessing that something happened in the moment that we need to just proclaim, we need to exclaim, we need to just express that something just happened in the moment. So we hold on to those moments where joy is, and it's again about honesty, right? It's about honesty that this moment is a moment of joy. This is not a moment of lament. And I need to make room in the present to let joy have its moment as well. Just like we letting grief has its moment. So we move to the side and let joy have its moment so that it can give us the hope to move forward in the future.
Dieula, thank you so much. You likely know that your publisher, Nav Press, has a tagline that is bold, loving, sensible, which is also part of the title of this podcast and the kind of conversations we have on this show, which I think you and I just had. So I have a few quick little questions around that tagline. And the first one is, where could you be more bold?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think in the area of advocacy. I told the women in Kenya that I fear of upsetting people. So sometimes I shy away from speaking up boldly in the area of advocacy, the area of, when people are either telling others how the healing journey should be rather than what it is, or even in the area of violence against women. Those are areas that I feel like I can be more bold, and sometimes fear holds me back from being more bold.
Okay. Wow. What is the most sensible advice your parents or a good friend gave you? And maybe it was to be bold.
Yeah, right. Years ago, a good friend of mine gave me this advice. I was sharing with her that it is so hard to do the work of God because it feels hard to enter different organizations who will receive me or who will help me, who will support the vision that God has given me. And she told me, if the thing that you want to do has not yet been done, create it. And that advice has helped me so much in the work that I'm doing. I continue to create as I'm seeing there's a need, there's a gap, and perhaps many organizations or nonprofits cannot really conceptualize or even embrace what God is showing me. I continue to be in a space of creating. So that was sage advice that continues to speak true even today.
And finally, where or when have you grown most in love?
I love that question. I really do. And I find that I have grown most in love when my posture is at a place of calm, when I feel more grounded, when I'm full of humility. And when I have compassion in my heart, I feel more in love. when my posture is just grounded, when I feel like God is with me, when I'm tired, when I'm tired, when I feel less confident of myself and what God is doing, when I feel like I'm going through something hard or difficult, I can't figure it out. I, I don't love well. When I feel protective, when I feel defensive, I don't love well at all. So those spaces, I pull away. But when I'm grounded and I feel confident in what God is doing, when I let God be God, um, and I feel like I'm humbled by God, and I'm able to see the other side of people. I'm able to put my feet in other people's shoes. I feel more in love with people, the world, and the work that I'm doing. Yeah.
Dieula, our readers are our friends and conversation partners with us. Can you offer a blessing as we read, and maybe especially as we read your book?
Ah, yes. May the stories you're reading reveal your own unfinished work. May they propel you into greater healing and connection with yourself, others, the earth, and God. May they cause you to be more joyful and more loving.
Thank you.